Welcome to the Tales of a Gearhead podcast. I'm your host, Stacey David. This podcast is brought to you by LMC Truck. Keep them on the road is their slogan, and they supply the parts to help you do that. Also, Cornwell Tools, the choice of professionals and hot rods and enthusiasts alike. If you want quality tools, Cornwell's the place to go. Let's get to it. All right, I've got a question here that is going to create a lot of conversations, shall we say. I'm sure we will come back to this many, many times. It's, what do you think about clones and replica cars? Let the games begin. All right, for those of you that don't really know what we're talking about, when we're talking about a clone or a tribute car or a replica car, this is basically when somebody takes a car like a Mustang and turns it into a Boss 302 Mustang. And we're talking like a 60s muscle car, or you build a replica Cobra or something like that. You're going to find that people have very, very passionate opinions one way or the other on this. We're going to go into that a little bit so you kind of know what you're going to be up against if you decide to play this game. Now, I'm going to start by saying that it's your car, build it the way you want it. I will always tell people to do that. But you kind of need to know the game you're getting into before you build that car. So let's just look at it. Okay, now if you'll notice, nobody really builds replicas of cars before the 50s. And actually even 50s cars. And the reason being is that when you bought a car in the 30s or the 40s or into the 50s, you just bought a 55 Chevy. Now you might have had a different engine option, but they didn't really have the high performance packages that came later. Okay, so where the replicas and clones and stuff really start is when you start to get into the 60s muscle cars and on. Okay, so it's 1967 and you want a Chevelle, but you can't afford the Chevelle SS. So you buy a Malibu, which is a cheaper version, or you just buy a Chevelle. And you don't get all the special gewgaws and bells and whistles and the bigger engine and all that stuff that the more expensive car has. And so people that drove around on the streets, if you had a Boss Mustang or a Hemi Cuda, well, you had some bragging rights and just naturally came with that car. And so guys would be driving around in their Barracudas with their 318s, and then when Johnny would drive in with his 426 Hemi, well, immediately everybody would flock to him and the girls and all that stuff. So there was an image that went with that, and you spent the most money, and they were expensive. And these cars were very limited. Okay, so they were always desirable. Back in the day, if you took a car, say you had just a Barracuda, and you tried to make it look like a Hemi car, well, people kind of frowned on that because you're kind of a pretender. You know, so people were like, ah, man, that's fake, that's not real, you know, get the real thing. So a lot of the guys back in the 60s, they wouldn't even try to do that. They would just build their Barracuda how they would want it, and they would go try to beat the Hemi Cuda. And that's how the whole street racing thing kind of happened. Okay, after that, there was the second tier of the street rod thing. This is into the 70s and into the 80s. Now these cars are old, and they're on the street corners and this kind of thing. So people started to kind of pick them up, and it didn't really matter, you know, to that next generation if they were original cars or not. So this is when a lot of guys were like, you know, I'll just put some stripes on the Chevelle and call it a Chevelle SS. It was kind of harmless, and people, because they didn't grow up in that era, nobody really cared. Well, now you're getting into the next step, and this is when all of a sudden the cars started to become valuable. And this is in the late 80s, early 90s. Now these auctions started to come up. You have a lot of the baby boomers that had the cars new going back and buying them. Now these cars are valuable in their original condition. Okay, so now guys are actually going out and looking for a numbers matching SS, 427 Camaro, all of these high dollar cars that you couldn't have back in the day. Well, there were some, shall we say, crooked car builders that found out that if they took a car and faked it, they could sell it as an original, run to the bank with the money, and it wouldn't be until a few years later the guy realized he bought a fake. Okay, this was a really bad thing. You should never fake a car with the intention of trying to lie to people. But that happened a lot. So there got to be a really bad image to a replica or a clone. People would walk up to guys at car shows and they would have their DZ Camaro or boss this or judge that, and they would say, is that a real one or is that a fake? Well, you never want to tell anybody your car's a fake if you spent the last 2 years working on it. So that's when the terms replicas and clones and tributes started to come forth, because people are like, well, it's not the real thing, but I'm not trying to fool you. It's just the car I want. So there was a little bit of a struggle there, and people, kind of fought that battle. And that was really when the cars were worth a lot original. Well, now let's get into the fourth tier, which is going on now. Now we have the whole resto mod thing going on, where people really don't care about cars being original anymore. Unless you have that real rare low mile Camaro or Corvette, people don't really care about that. So now, once again, people are throwing stripes on stuff, SS stripes or this or that, and people don't really care because they just want the car to be cool. So now you have guys that are building these resto mod tribute cars, and they're actually pretty valuable. That is the world that you're going to be jumping into if you start wanting to do a clone or a replica. There was a time where, Carroll Shelby himself, he tried to sue everybody that had ever built a Cobra kit car. He said they all owed him money. And of course that was ridiculous, and they worked it out. And I know companies like Factory 5 and some of these others had a lot of struggles with that. But see, now you can actually get one of those cars, you can call it a Cobra, it's just not a real Shelby Cobra, which has a lot more value to it. The big thing is, I don't ever really build anything that is a tribute or a replica. I always do my own thing on it, and I would suggest you do that as well. For example, on the V8 Interceptor Cougar, when I started building that, immediately people started saying, oh, are you going to build it as a Cougar Eliminator? And I was like, well, no, why would I do that? There's a lot better things to do to it than the Eliminator package that they did back in the late 60s. On those Cougars, the original wing on the back was the same wing that Mopar used on a lot of their A bodies. It just kind of kicked down on the ends. And so I took a wing from a 69 Trans Am that I got from year one and grafted it on the back. And of course we had to work the ends and make it fit, but now we have a very unique wing on the back of that Cougar, and it looks like an Eliminator wing until you put it beside a real Eliminator. So that's the thing, and that's the whole street rod, hot rod mentality of you take the vehicle, you modify it to the way you want to do it. That's what I would suggest you do. If you've got to have SS stripes on it, that's fine, go ahead and do it. Just know that people are going to walk up to you at a show and they're going to say, hey, is that a real SS or is it not? And you're going to have to deal with that. And if you do, just don't get upset about it. You just tell them how you built it and you build it the way you want. But that's what you're going to be up against. Let us know what you think about that, guys. That's a touchy area for some people. One of the big challenges that faces restorers out there today is finding good quality original parts. And there's a lot of places out there that carry custom parts, but finding those original parts can be very difficult. And that's one of the reasons you hear me talk about LMC Truck all the time. Because if you're doing a truck project, Ford, Chevy, Dodge, doesn't matter what year, they carry everything, they have got the parts, those little screws and those nuts and those little fasteners that you can't find anywhere, you can find at LMC. So if you have a project, even if you're not working on a truck, but you might need some hardware or something, that is Ford, Chevy, or Dodge related, you need to have an LMC catalog, because I guarantee you, they got something that you can use. Now here's a good question. It comes from Tex in New Mexico, and he says, I'm just getting into restoring and building cars myself and want to pick up a welder. What kind of welder should I get? Great question. I always tell people the first welder that you should get is a MIG welder. Forget a stick, forget a TIG. If you're doing restoration work and you're getting ready to weld, nasty panels on a beat up rusty car, a MIG is going to be the best way to start. You don't need a 220. I would get just a 110 machine, because you're probably just going to do sheet metal. A 110 machine will do heavy steel as well, enough to be able to work on your frame. So you'll be able to to do what you need to do. But I definitely suggest getting a name brand, like a Miller, a Lincoln, a Hobart, Aesop, something like that. Personally, I stay away from the cheap no-name stuff, you know, that you pick up at the parts houses. I'm not going to name anybody's names, but you know the ones I'm talking about. Don't get little Taiwanese-made machines or anything. If you're going to be using it a lot, if you're just going to weld once in a while, that'll be okay. But if you're really serious about it, invest some good money and get a good tool, because there is a difference, believe me. Pick yourself up a little MIG and you'll be happy. Learn to use it, you know, take some classes and practice with it, and you'll love it. Here's a question that has come in from a guy that has just picked up a junker, and he's trying to clean up the seats, the vinyl, and the dash. He says, man, I have bought the cleaners at the auto parts store, and they're not getting it. It's like, well, yeah, I'll tell you what, this is a little detailer's secret. Forget all that stuff at the auto parts stores. Go down and get yourself some of that Scrubbing Bubbles bathroom cleaner. You know the stuff, little Scrubbing Bubbles? Spray that stuff on there, man. It will clean that vinyl and your rubber floor mats like nothing you've ever seen. You can just wipe it off of there. If it's really bad, you can take a soft brush and agitate it a little bit. It is a great cleaner. And you probably know also one of the best degreasers that you can get is Easy Off Oven Cleaner. Obviously, this stuff is very caustic, it's very dangerous, so make sure you're being careful with it. But if you want to clean up an engine or something, that Easy Off is definitely a way to do it. Now, one thing about this Scrubbing Bubbles thing too, have you ever been to a show or worked on a car where somebody's gone out and just drenched the tires with Armor All or a similar style of product, and they're all glossy and staticky and they're holding dust and they're just, you know, they're a mess. This stuff will take that off and clean those tires back up. So if you ever want to get that stuff off your dash, any of those silicone style cleaners, this Scrubbing Bubble stuff is really good at doing that. On the subject of Armor All and those kind of things, if you are ever going to paint a piece, keep that stuff as far as you possibly can away from any surface that you're going to paint, because it will fisheye like nothing you have ever seen, and it is very difficult to get that stuff off. You'll have to scrub it and scrub it and scrub it with this stuff to get the surface clean again to where you can paint it and lay some paint on it. So if you're getting ready to paint something, keep away from those silicone style cleaners. You know, you hear me talk about tools a lot, and there's a reason for that, because we couldn't do what we do as car guys without tools. And we always need quality tools. And I always encourage people to find the best quality tool that you can. And for me, you know, after years of doing this, decades now, I haven't found anybody better than Cornwell Tools. And there's they've been in business for 100 years. So obviously they know what they're doing. They continue to push forward in their tools and their boxes. They continue to push forward in new technology. I'm always eager to see what they come out with, and I will recommend them many times to you guys. There is a difference between buying something American and buying something that's an overseas imitation. And you guys that are car guys and tool guys, you know what I'm talking about. So check them out, Cornwell Tools. You won't be disappointed. Got a great question here from Robert. Robert has just picked up a classic car, and he wants to know what he can do to keep it from getting stolen. Well, that's a really good question. There's a lot of things that you can do. He wants to know if he should buy a high-dollar alarm system or what. Honestly, Robert, I wouldn't spend a lot of money on an alarm system. There's better ways to do it, and nobody listens to those things anyway. Let me go through just some ways that you can make your vehicle virtually theft-proof. Now, I say virtually because if the thief is good, he's going to get your car. I mean, I've seen him come in with trailers and just pick the vehicle up and off they go. And the only way to fight that is with some sort of a locating device, which I would suggest. That way, you can just trace it back down, find it in the guy's garage. But let's go back to some of these things. Okay, the first thing we're going to talk about is something that doesn't cost you any money. It's very simple, and obviously this is for, older style engines that have a distributor. If you just go under your hood, pull off the center coil wire in your distributor, and then pull off one of your spark plug wires and just swap them. Just plug it in place. It will not start like that, and most people will look at that and they'll never notice that those two wires have been swapped. And that's a very simple, quick way for nobody to drive off with your car. The only drawback to that one is obviously you got to get under the hood and you got to do it. So you may not want to do that. Okay, well, another way to do it is you can get these battery cables that have the screw-in disconnect. So basically, once again, you go under your hood, you just unscrew the little knob, and the battery cable, the positive battery cable comes off, or the ground, either one, and your battery's disconnected. And you just put the little knob in your pocket and walk around. Once again, the downside to that, you got to get under the hood and do it. A third option is to do a fuel cutoff valve. This goes down in your fuel line, and it's just a little valve. You just reach under there and you turn it, shuts off the fuel. Vehicle's not going to run with no fuel. That's a really good way to do it. Once again, you got to get out, turn the little valve. Another way, which is similar to that, is a battery cutoff switch. And you can buy these from Painless, you can get them from Watson Street Works. A lot of places carry these things. And it's a big switch that wires into your battery cable, and you just flip it and it turns off all the power to the car. And once again, vehicle won't run with that shut off. Once again, though, the only drawback is you have to get out and flip the switch. And a lot of thieves, that's the first thing they're going to look at. If your car won't start and they're trying to steal it, they're going to look for a battery cutoff switch. All right, the next one, this is one that I have done a lot, and it's just a little toggle switch that wires into the negative wire coming off your coil that goes to the base of the distributor. And what you do is you just wire in a toggle switch there, and all that does is it cuts that negative wire to the distributor, car won't start. Put the little toggle switch under the dash or whatever, you just reach up and you flip that switch, that car will never start. And most people will never know to look for that. But now you're getting into something where you're in the driver's seat, you reach over, you put this switch in the glove box or whatever, you flip the switch, you don't have to worry about somebody ripping off your vehicle. The only drawback to the cutoff switch is if you're driving down the road and you accidentally flip that switch, she's gonna shut off on you guys. So my recommendation is you put it somewhere where you can't accidentally hit it, and you don't tell your friends where it's at, because there's always that smart aleck that'll be in the car and go, hey, watch this, and you'll shut your car off, which generally means your power steering quits working, your power brakes quit working. Yeah, not a good deal. This is your secret. Don't tell your buddies, don't tell your friends. Those are probably the best ways to do it. There are some anti-theft systems. I know Watson Street Works carries a really nice one, where once again it's a toggle switch. They have them that just have a little band that you wave across it. They have a lot of things like that that are nice. They're a little more high-tech than just wiring into something into the distributor. But then you get to the point where there's going to be somebody that, you know, if they really, really want the vehicle, they can just grab it. That's where you would want to put a locating device on the vehicle. So if somebody does take it, you can easily find it, take the cops right to their house, or the container ship, or whatever they may have put it in. Hopefully that helps. There's a lot of options there. These little things that I gave you right here, they will stop 95% of the thieves. Because remember, most thieves, first of all, are idiots. They're not car guys, or they wouldn't be stealing cars. They're just after something quick. As soon as they get into a vehicle and something deters them taking it quickly, they're going to move on, especially if, you know, they can't get out of there very quickly. All you want to do is deter them enough to where, you know, they go elsewhere. Keep in mind, this podcast is made possible by our friends at LMC Truck and our friends at Cornwell Tools. All right, that wraps it up for us today. It is time for you to get out there, start working on something, build something with your own two hands, send in your questions, send in your pictures, let us know what you're working on. All right, we'll see you later.